Hey, this is Alpha. Today I am doing a follow-up video on my previous MCP video, which I covered back 5 months. You can see that on your screen now. Today I'm going to talk about what has changed in the industry since then and why should non-dollar brands use MCP servers today. Let's get into it. For those who haven't seen my previous video or haven't seen the official announcement, back in November of last year, Anthropic, one of the large language providers, released a new protocol called Model Context Protocol, or MCP for short. This is a significant release in that it actually allowed the industry to empower AI agents and agentic workflows. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like in a second. I think the best analogy I came across online is by Anthropic. Think of MCP servers like a USB port for your AI applications or agents. Just as USB-C provides a standardized way to connect your devices to various peripherals and accessories, MCP provides a standardized way to connect AI models to different data sources and tools. It is a USB-C for agents and workflows. So it allows agents and workflows to connect to third-party data, which means third-party APIs, easier than not using this protocol. So let's talk about what has changed since the previous video that I covered on MCP. The Anthropic team recognized that the previous implementation for sending data over HTTP and SSC protocol was not sufficient. They replaced it with a new protocol, or transport vehicle, which they call StreamBall HTTP. So hypertext plus service sent event transport is now superseding the last year release of the previous implementation. This is backwards compatible, but it is an important change in the ecosystem. So all this shows is that the server now operates in such a way that it's able to handle multiple concurrent client connection at the same time. What's interesting here is actually it supports two of the traditional HTTP CRUD-like requests. One is post, one is get. But what's unique here is that it can do both HTTP and SSC at the same time. So you can see server can optionally use service end events to stream to multiple server messages. So again, you can do a traditional request response. That's what this is here, but you can also use SSC, and this is of course useful for real time. This is useful for streaming a chat response into the UI without waiting for the response to finish. And this is the new way of doing things, streamable HTTP. You can read more about it on their documentation. I'll quickly scroll down here. They do have a great sequence diagram, and if I just zoom out, you can see it's quite a bit actually here. There we go. You can see that it's still following the previous architecture client server. However, there's now a few elements here that are slightly unique. Initialization is the same. Client request, again, slightly different because you have implementation of both traditional HTTP and SSC, and now you have notification and response coming back, and then server pushing back data. So very useful to understand if you're trying to make sense of this new way of doing things. So what happened since the release? Microsoft adopted MCP on Windows. Now this is a release made on 19th of May. It just happened. If you look at the official announcement on Microsoft blog, we do see they actually add native support, which is quite unique, into Windows 11. That means you can use the Windows AI, which I believe is called Cortana, if I'm not mistaken. And that means you can also ask Cortana to talk to third-party APIs, third-party data using the MCP, and that's built in. Of course, OpenAI is there as well. OpenAI does the same. This is 2 days later. They release their official support for what they call a remote MCP server, but that's nothing more than just connecting to MCP servers that exist either officially through Anthropic, third parties, or anybody else. Great to see both players dive right into the adoption, and this is just a response to, or indication rather, that the industry has very well adopted to MCP server, and now it's just a matter of time until more and more others follow suit. Perhaps DeepSeek, perhaps others. Meta is another example. I want to now briefly touch on a unique strategy that I believe a $1 million brand can use today to quickly get started with MCP servers and quickly adopt these servers for their business applications, and not only that, but also monetize on this new MCP trend. We have a developer just releasing this 3 days ago, a video called "Your API is not an MCP," which is a great talk. I encourage you to watch. 14 minutes roughly is the time, but I want to focus on 3 problems that this specific individual has brought up in the talk, and they are related to allowing a business to extend their API using MCP. And but before I dive into the problems, I want to really give you the high-level overview first, explain the problems that can be addressed with the creation of your own MCP server, and then conclude this talk. So first of all, your API is your public-facing interface for third parties, your clients, your customers, to get access to your data. That's a very good way for others to communicate with your business. It's programmatic. It relies on authentication. It is simple to manage through token use. However, it is limited in that the API as well is often written for developers, and developers would use your API to communicate with your business or service. But again, these are human-focused services, human-focused workflows. Your API is mostly written for humans, for developers. Now, there is a distinction with an MCP server. As you've seen before, MCP server is nothing more than an additional layer to an API, or an agent rather. So from that perspective, I would claim that MCP is your additional service that you can offer to your clients, your customers, that would extend your API. So think of it like API being the first layer, MCP server being the second layer, and the MCP server would simply communicate with your API. Now, the developer in this talk talks about taking your API, automatically converting that to an MCP server, and they identify 3 problems with that approach, and I'll briefly touch on them. First problem is that language models are bad at selecting tools from a long list. And that is true if you have an API docs, and that docs shows you 100 different endpoints. Well, you can easily overwhelm a smaller language model with 100 endpoints. You do need to be selective. You do need to pay attention to which tools you offer. Second problem is your API are not ready for large language models. APIs are usually written for people, for developers. They're very verbose. They are not optimized for the way language models work. Language models, when using MCP servers, are looking to accomplish tasks. Because of that, they need what would be considered to be a tool use. And so the best way to represent that is through functions. So large language models who rely on MCP servers need functions. They need functional programming to be able to execute well, meaning they need to use tools to retrieve a specific function to get back a result. That's the second problem. And of course, third problem is the APIs. Developer-friendly APIs are designed for resource management and automation, not for humans. Large language models are human-like. I would partially agree with this one. As I mentioned, APIs are designed for developers because developers are the ones who are writing the APIs themselves. But if you project it out to an MCP server, you recognize that MCP servers are unique. They are written in such a way that they are helping developers accomplish specific tasks. So they're no more task-focused or more function-focused. And now let's talk about what could be an approach for business if you were already in operation. If you already have a public-facing API, what can you do? How can you extend that API to be an API server, for an MCP server rather? Well, we do have one possible approach here. You auto-generate the MCP code. Of course, there are lots of effort on how to do that. You can take OpenAI spec and automatically generate the MCP spec for it. And there's many other ways to do that. You can take your existing API docs or API reference guide, and you can give that to a large language model and generate the MCP implementation of it. But that's not enough. And the next step is to reduce how many tools you would actually give to a large language models. From my agency experience of developing AI agents and workflows for million-dollar brands, I have recognized that if you overwhelm the agent or the workflow with too many choices, you start to stumble. Often people refer to as hallucination, but really you get a poor response back from large language models. The agent is not able to select the right tool. The agent only looks at the first several, misses the ones in the middle perhaps, and so on and so forth. So you do need to remove tools. You need to be select. I would say cap the tool used between 5 and 10. I think that should be a good starting point for an agent. Definitely don't want to push past 10, and on the safe side, perhaps start with 3 and aim for 5 to 10. Here you have the next step where you look at all the descriptions that tools have. Of course, descriptions were previously written by developers for automation purposes, but in this case, the descriptions must be written for agents, so they must be rewritten. And of course, you have now the ability to develop new tools. You're not limited by the previous tools of the previous API. This is where you can get creative. If your business is in operation and they already have existing 3 to 5 tools as an MCP server, they're not limited to that. They can create a new tool based on what they observe is happening, the way that people use their API. And of course, you can write evaluations to detect how well those tools are performing. I think this is a good way for a business today to extend their existing service into the world. If you have any questions about what I said, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you would like to hire me for your next MCP project, I'm happy to do so. I do take discovery calls, and I would be interested to hear what you're working on. I appreciate your time. Until next time.